So we've seen the value of the Visual Studio Code extension. Now we want to learn how to build our own. Now, unlike the other enablement topics that we've had so far in Devtoberfest, we've usually supplied tutorials ourselves and started to look around and think about building a little tutorial on how to develop your own VS Code extension. But actually, we already have one provided by Microsoft at code.visualstudio.com. So I'll put a link to this tutorial on getting started building your first extension. But I thought, well, it'd still be useful like the others to give you a little video that walks you through it and talks about some of the concepts. And this is useful because it's also related to how we do some of our normal development now in SAP in the Business Application Studio or VS Code as well. And I want to point out some of those interesting similarities. So we're going to start from the command line. And I've already got Yeoman installed. So I can see that if I just issue yo at the command line, it'll start the Yeoman generator. And as you see here, it's showing me a list of generators that are already installed. And I've got one for Visual Studio Code. That's can be installed manually, as the tutorial said. I've already got it installed in my system. Easy UI 5, MTA module, Cap project, Fiori elements, Fiori Street, Freestyle. So you see, Microsoft is using Yeoman to help you generate Visual Studio Code extension projects, and SAP is using Yeoman to help you generate MTA and Cap projects and Fiori elements projects. And this is what in the previous video was actually running behind the scenes when I did the Fiori elements wizard. That nice UI that guided me through there was really just running the Yeoman template behind the scenes and visualizing the steps of that Yeoman template. I'm going to go here and I'm going to choose the code one for Visual Studio Code. And now I can say what I want it to do. What type of extension do I want to create? New language support, new code snippets, new key map, new color themes. So we saw a variety of different types of extensions in the previous video, and you see here there are different project templates for those. We're going to go ahead and choose new extension TypeScript. And then what is the name of our extension? We're going to say hello 2 because I've done this tutorial before. I don't want to conflict with something I've done. In fact, yeah, I'm not even sure 2 will get me good enough. We'll say hello 20 just to make sure I haven't done. I'm pretty sure I've done hello 2 or 3 or 4 on different project types. I choose hello and hello world quite often. So we'll go ahead there. What is the identifier of your extension? We'll go ahead and keep it at the default. Hello 20. Description. Hello world demo. Initialize a Git repository. Yes, I am doing this in my Git folder. And which package manager to use? I use the Node Package Manager, NPM. And it has just created the project structure for me. Project named Hello 20. And now it's running npm install to install all the required dependent modules. So I'll be ready to go here just as soon as this is done. There we are, all finished. And now I can just tell code to open that project. Hello 20. And as you'll see here, we're going to use Visual Studio Code to develop our Visual Studio Code extensions. Let's go ahead and clean this up, resize things a little bit, and we should be ready to start on the next step. Now, before we even do any development, we've got a pretty complete application or I should say, a VS Code extension already developed for us by the wizard. Let's see first how we can run and test VS Code extensions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the F5 key. And what that should do, there we are. When I press F5, it is building, as you see down here, and it will then run the extension in place temporarily in my instance of Visual Studio Code. This is nice because it gives us a sandbox environment and a quick way to be able to run our VS Code extensions to test them without having to fully deploy them and install them into an instance of VS Code. So a very safe way to do temporary testing. You see here at the title of Visual Studio Code, Extension Development Host, which means it's running the extension code from my other project, but now running it in place in a quick little test environment, if you will. And if we go to the command palette now, and go ahead and type hello world, and we run that, what we should see, there we are. It took a little while, and I've got an error here from an unrelated, from a different extension. Don't be confused by that. I have a lot of extensions installed. I think that was just the normal initialization time of my Visual Studio Code because it launched a whole nother instance of Visual Studio Code. And then we got our hello message. Let me actually do that again now that things have warmed up here. We go ahead and do command palette and hello world. And now right away we see hello world from hello 20 exclamation point. That's coming from the other project. And don't be confused here. We have the two running side by side. And if we go back to the original, we see, some of the log messages. So if I were to grab my other window here, it's gotten all weirdly sized. There we are. So this gives us the ability to test from the code here in one instance of Visual Studio Code, running in a sandboxed second instance of Visual Studio Code, and as I'm executing my extension, if anything would go wrong or any errors would be produced, we would see those come back to the original window where it's running. So it gives us the ability to debug or log and trace our extension very easily during the development process. So now let's go back to our original project. I'll go ahead and stop it here. And let's look a little bit of what got generated for us. Well, we've got a package JSON, and this is where we can set up the build process for our extension. We see some of our dependencies because this is TypeScript. We're going to need type libraries for some of the inner used modules that we're going to need. We have the ability to register events this is where we're saying activation events. We're adding to the command palette a hello world command. And that command, there we see the command ID, which we're registering to the on command, and the title of hello world. And here we can see we can change that if we want. That will change what shows up in the command palette when we go to execute this. There's also the tsconfig JSON. This is just our normal configuration for TypeScript. I'll put in the notes a link. I did an episode of the regular live streaming show. Probably good 2.5 months back, where we did a deep dive look at TypeScript in general. So if you're interested in TypeScript, link over to that for more information. If you remember to the Yeoman generator, though, if I go back to that, you have a choice here. Most Visual Studio Code extensions do do use TypeScript to be strongly typed, but there was the option there. We could have chosen JavaScript as well as our extension type. And actually, in the next episode, I'm going to show you a JavaScript-based extension. But we went with the more common scenario and the one that matched the tutorial that I'm running here as well. Finally, let's go to the source, and what we see is our extension TS. And this is where we see our code. Not a whole lot going on here. When the extension is activated, this is the code that will be executed. So what we see here is, congratulations, your extension is now active. It's linked. And we're registering the command. And then a callback event handler for when that command is issued. So this is all of our logic pretty much right here. And we're just going to say VSCode Windows show information message. So we have nice built-in APIs for interacting with the rest of the VS Code environment. And we're able to say hello world from hello 20. So let's maybe change this. And let's say hello world from Devtoberfest. Go ahead and we've saved both of these. And let's go ahead and run this again. That will start up. Running. And there we are. Our extension development host is restarted with the new code for our extension in place. And right away, if we go to the command palette, and already we see hello world has changed to hello world press me. We change that in the package JSON. And when I choose that now, still working hard to activate extensions, so we'll be patient and give it a second. There we see. Congratulations, your extension is now active. Hello 20 is now active. And there we are. Hello world from Devtoberfest. And like I said, on first startup, it takes a little while, particularly because I have a lot of extensions installed into my environment. Probably could go back and weed out a fair number of extensions. I've played around with a lot of different ones. It gets a little crowded in here for doing new extension development. Let's do that again. Let's just choose the hello world, press me, and there we are. Comes right back. Hello world from Devtoberfest. Okay. And for the last part of this tutorial, we want to see how easy it is to debug in this environment where we have the two Visual Studio Code windows. And what I can do is I can just go back to my window here in my event handler that's going to be triggered on the command here, on the hello command. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And what we want to do is, before we issue the show information message, let's stop in the debugger. So all we have to do is set our breakpoint, and we'll say restart. And we'll let that environment reload here. And now that we've reloaded, we can come here to the command palette and once again choose our hello world. And what we see is now we're back in our first instance of Visual Studio Code. The breakpoint has stopped right here, and we have the ability to fully debug. I come over here into my debug mode, and I can see globals and locals and things like that, and I have a full debug environment. So I'm debugging the code that is executing over here in my other instance of Visual Studio Code. So I have a pretty comfortable development environment in which to work out my VS Code extensions without having to do any weird installation back and forth kinds of things. So I know this was a very simple introduction just to kind of get your feet wet to see what it's like to create your own VS Code extensions. There are many more tutorials that are available in the VS Code website. I certainly won't go through them all here, But in the next episode, what I want to do is show you how we could go about building, or more accurately, extending one of the community-created HANA-specific extensions that have been developed and released for Visual Studio Code.